Welcome everyone to the FYI series, DCRI Clinical Operations. This is series number 4. We've entitled it China Mobilization, but you could also call it Psychological First Aid for the earthquake victims in China. We have with us Dr. Zhang, whom it's my great pleasure to have worked with over the last 15 years. Dr. Zhang came to Duke 19 years ago with a research fellowship with Dr. Blumenthal. After she completed the research fellowship, I should say that Dr. Zhang was a well-known cardiologist in China. After she completed the research fellowship, she went to complete a joint fellowship in psychiatry and internal medicine. She's an associate professor, and she's been on the faculty since 2002, where her clinical work is focused on the interface of psychiatry and medicine, and her research has examined the importance of stress and depression on heart disease and other medical conditions. When Dr. Zhang first came from China, she expressed her strong desire to give back to her country the knowledge and the wisdom that she had hoped that she would acquire here at Duke. She's been very active with the Chinese community in the Research Triangle Park, and over the years has provided numerous educational lectures on health and well-being to various civic groups in the Durham area. She has also provided translation for Chinese patients at Duke when needed, and participated in the Asia Health Fair in the Triangle to help educate Asian families about various mental health and medical issues. Dr. Zhang has been nominated for the Martin Luther King Jr. Community Caregiver Award. Dr. Zhang has numerous publications. She's been the PI on numerous clinical trials, 2 of which were conducted here. The first one was the first pivotal trial, collaborative trial between psychiatry and DCRI, cardiology, and it was, the safety and efficacy of sertraline on early post-MI patients. We've currently completed a study on, again, the safety and efficacy of sertraline on patients with chronic heart failure. Dr. Zhang.
Well, Peggy, thank you so much for this so nice introduction. I'm flattered. In fact, Peggy is such a wonderful person to work together, and we met at the beginning of 1994 when I was actually working at DCRI. Peggy was working in psychiatry. At the time we started working on the first SAD heart study, and then since then, we just can never separate from each other. Yeah, and also I appreciate so much of you all coming. So in the next hour or so, I will try to talk about our experience for serving in the earthquake zone in China. And I'm happy to entertain any questions if you guys have during the talk, or if you wish to save till the end of the talk. Any problems? Stop moving. Run out of battery. It's too technical. I can use this button, right? No. Page down. Oh, okay, good. So just use that, right? Use the page down button. Okay. Between August 23rd and September 7th, and the Duke team went to China, went to the earthquake zone, and provided a service to the victims of the earthquake zone, and provided a service to the mental health providers there who have been serving the victims during the, following the earthquake. We did a lot. Also, we learned a lot. we learned more than we could have even thought about. So due to the time constraint, I cannot share with you all the experiences we have gained from this trip. But I will try to talk as much as I can. And also I wanted to use a good amount of time to talk about what is our intake on what kind of service international aid can provide in those kind of situations in terms of promoting mental health service post-disaster. I also wanted to leave plenty time for you guys to share with me your comments and questions. Okay, so I'm going to start with a very short movie clip for us to revisit the earthquake and the physical impact resulted from the earthquake. Psychological impact of such kind of disaster is massive. According to the WHO estimate, after a natural disaster, the prevalent rate of mild to moderate and severe mental health disorders are likely to increase to 20% and 3 to 4% respectively among the affected population. And the rates are considered much higher among the victims of massive disaster, as the WHO estimated that following the 2004 Asia tsunami, and the patient become moderately to severely mentally ill, were up to 50%. Many kind of psychiatric conditions emerge after such kind of catastrophic disaster. I'm not going to mention each of them here. And we know very well, especially among our group who are devoting our life and doing research, taking care of patients in the mental health field, is that if those kind of mental disorders are not appropriately managed, and those kind of conditions will last for a long time, may last for the rest of the life of those people, and will affect their physical conditions and will reduce their life expectancies. China is like many developing countries in this world, has very little psychiatric service. In a country of 1.3 billion population, which is official, and as far as we believe that probably is beyond 1.5 billion. And there's only 17,000 certified psychiatrists in the entire country. And the ratio compared to a developed country in terms of physician to patients is only 1 to 10%. And that's not to say the number of patients have not been identified appropriately in China. And also, like many other developing countries, those physicians are located in psychiatric facilities and a few tertiary hospitals across the country in large cities. There is no community-based psychiatric service prior to the earthquake in China. Sichuan is the largest province in China with a population surpass 100 million. After we approached the Chinese government about taking a medical team there, we were informed by them that at that time they believed that there were 40 to 50,000 severely mentally ill patients in Sichuan were not under psychiatric care. Although it was the first time ever in the Chinese history that Chinese government allowed people who doing psychological counseling to be at the disaster zone to provide psychological counseling following this earthquake. But many people there who were not formally trained with psychological counseling. Majority of the people there delivered the psychological counseling were just volunteers from like a high school or from other area. So with all that, and we originally came from China and received a wonderful training here in this country, especially at Duke, felt like we were obligated to give a hand to those sufferers. So we decided to form a team to go there to help out. And the main purpose we wanted to do is to provide a psychiatric intervention to survivors of the earthquake and to provide professional assistance to the local health providers who have been taking care of those victims, and also to understand the infrastructure of a post-quake mental health rehabilitation and acceptance of victims to mental health service in that area. Because mental health provided by international aids are usually constrained by language barriers, so we decided to have a team of members all speak Chinese and at least know some of the local culture. And also due to political reasons And we formed the team all originally from mainland China. And prior to our departure, we received green lights from several layers of the Chinese government, from the Chinese embassy in the States, and the Ministry of Health Department of China, and the local government. We went through the office system of managing Chinese overseas. And we also received a very warm welcome note from the hospital we were assigned to work with in Sichuan province. This is our team. From the left to right, the one in the red shirt is Mr. Chen, who is research assistant here at Duke with the molecular biology department. He was the president of the local Chinese community last year. Second one is Yin Song, who is a biomedical engineering, is working at Duke with the biomedical department. In fact, we're happy to have him come to join us today. So if you guys have any question, you can ask him as well. And this is Dr. Glenn Xiong, and he actually was educated at Duke with the medicine and psychiatry combined training program. He graduated 2 years ago, went to California at UC Davis on faculty. We tried very, very hard to keep him here at Duke, but the food here is just not attractive. So he has to go to California for the good Chinese food. We arrived on the eve of the 29th Olympic in China, and we had no time to enjoy any of the activities, and we were hurriedly passing Beijing airport. We stayed in the Beijing airport for a couple of hours and then went on the flight to Chengdu, where we are based to serve the service. So we arrived Chengdu on the eve of 25th. It could take us 2 days to get to China, and then we started working the next morning. I'm sorry, we arrived at Chengdu on the eve of the 24th and started working the next morning. It's the 25th. This is our schedule for the trip. So we spent 3 days on the inpatient service in Huaxi Hospital, where we're assigned to. Huaxi Hospital owns more than 4,000 inpatient beds. And they told us that they are the largest hospital in Asia. I think they are the largest hospital in the world. And then we visited 3 refugee centers over 5 days of period, and interacted with thousands of victims and children. And then we spent a day toward the campus and also prepare for trainings we're going to provide for the next 2 days. And then we trained the local and remote mental health providers for that 2 days, actually in conjunction of the team from East Tennessee University. And that team was led by Dr. Dyer, who was trained at Duke as a psychiatrist, actually practiced for many years. Unfortunately, Rob Caleb's not here. Otherwise, I would challenge him, because Alan told me that when he was on Williams' service, and Rob Caleb was the second-year resident. second-year student of medical school. And then we spent a day, visited victims in a rehabilitation center and an ICU at Huaxi Hospital. And we actually took a day earlier to Beijing from Chengdu. The reason we did it is because we were able to set a couple of meetings to meet with some level of the authorities in the health care system to try to understand the infrastructure and their plan for the future of mental health care in the post-disaster arena. This is one of the refugee center we went to, and this is their main street after the earthquake. And that's the team we formed together with the Huaxi Hospital. And this is in the early morning. We're talking about the tasks and what do we need to do that day, and we are sharing different responsibilities. And Dr. Xiong was participating in one of the group therapy for children. As you can see, the children were enjoying so much of playing with him. And we were at the Rehabilitation Center for the victims who are amputated or paralyzed because of the injury. And that's the chief resident, Dr. Zhang, was introducing us their arrangement and see all those patients' names listed on this board. And the road condition at times was very rough to travel to the refugee centers. And this is the little van we were in. And I have to thank Yin Song, who was able to take a lot of photographs for us. And I was halfway joking in a van to travel there. I said, the last time I was in this kind of a horrible condition was the time I was sent down to the countryside to work during the Cultural Revolution time. And I've never been in that situation until this trip. Like you were bouncing up and down. My head was almost to the ceiling of the van. There was one day we took 6 hours hiking into the small villages who were surrounded by mountains to visit the victims there. And the villagers have not seen a single physician since the earthquake until we got to them.
Oh my God. How long was that, Zhang?
3.5 months, a little bit more than 3.5 months. As you can see, the road condition at times is very scary. And those were created by the mudslides. And 3.5 months later, they were not cleaned. And there are still stones and rocks would roll over from the top to the bottom, and we have to walk through those kind of area. This photo was taken in front of one of the small villages, and this is their plate for the village. I'm so glad that Dr. Xiong was able to make such a big smile. 2 days prior to this day, he was running high fever. And day before, and Yin was running high fever. It looks like the young fellows just don't have the immune built up as the two old ones in the middle, so they were sick as hell. And we were visiting the villagers. Those family actually, they lost everything. And the military people who came to those places helped them to build up this temporary shelter. And this actually from 3 members of the family, 3 brothers. And they reunited after the earthquake and then were living in these conditions until their new house can be built. This old grandma, who's 85 years old, was living in one of the villages. She has back pain and leg pain. And this is a family of 9. Many villagers in this places just lost everything. Their houses and their lands were shaken into the valley. And following the earthquake, there was such trenching rain. All their staff were just washed away. And it has been a long time habit for those countryside Chinese people. They don't put their cash in the bank, and they hide their cash underneath of their bed. So everything was gone. Many families have only the pair of clothes they were wearing during the earthquake left. So this family were building shelters on their own because majority of the people were moved to the temporary house. But those people, they don't want to leave the land. They grew up and lived there for generations, so they decided to stay. And the Duke Human Resource Office were very kind to us, and they donated 120 blankets for us. I don't know if you guys recognize this. This is something we had last year, and they had some left over. So they donated to us, and then we brought it with us. So we shared with this grandma. We said, you can put it underneath of your body when you sleep. At least that may prevent some of the humid kind of thing, so that may reduce your pain. The damage is devastating. However, the victims are very resilient. For males, when we're traveling to one of the town, which is called Red and White, And we see few houses were still standing, probably less than 1%. Even for the ones who are still standing, it's not habitable. So this was the elementary school of the red and white town. After the earthquake, about 140 kids were killed. This was a collapsed mine. There were 180 miners. And following the collapse, there were only 8 escaped. Only one of the 8 were not injured. Massive graveyards emerged just in this single town. And rubbles can be several stories high. However, even with all this, and you can see this is the early morning, those villagers were very busy searching the rubble to find whatever they can to use again. The small pieces of wood here, and they take home to use as a fuel. And some larger pieces they take home to use that to rebuild furnitures. And some of them looking for plastic objects they feel like they can exchange for cash. Those women were searching the rubbles for intact brick to build their future home. This is one of the towns we visited, and volunteers in the engineering department in Beijing already designed a future home set for them. So the local people have to work out to find money and resource to build their houses. Regardless how hard the situation is, and the local people already started their new life. This is their temporary main street of the red and white town. And people using the tent they used early on during the following the earthquake, and started their business. Look, this is a washer restaurant, and we ate there one time. And those 2 young fellows went there to buy dumplings, and that was it. And no one could touch the food anymore because the number of flights were tripled than the people who were eating there. But the local people are very tough, and they tolerate this. This is another restaurant, and we just couldn't imagine how people feel, not scared to stay in this area. And we went to the front, and that area was not damaged, so people would go in and eat here. And then the restaurant, people were cooking at their back part of this house, non-destroyed house. Like I said, a majority of people have moved into this contemporary, this temporarily built housing places. And the ones in the village who refuse to move out, and they're using whatever they can get in the mountains to build their own shelters. The condition of the temporarily built house are very rough. I don't know if you can see clearly here, it's wet. So if it rains outside, it rains inside. When outside the rain stops and the inside is still dribbling. And this is one of the dorm of school, middle school kids. And see how jammed they are. In a 3 times 5 meter size room. And we counted there are 5 bunker beds. And then this particular room somehow have 12 cups here, so it must be too crowded, and then some of them squeezing in one bed. Those students will be here at least for another 1.5 years. And the ones who were living in the temporarily built housing, just like the residents, probably will live there for at least another 2 to 3 years before they can move to their newly built house. Even with this, and they are back into their routine life. And as you can see, the kids actually are studying English when we visited them. And then they are playing. This room is so hot, and they just have the single fan. But kids are kids, they cannot forget playing on the computer with the video games. Psychosomatic symptoms are very common. There's no concept among the Chinese people about confidentiality. And more than 20 years ago, when I was working in a hospital in a big city, and then the people come to me like just above my head. more than 20 years later, same thing. All the people just share their problems with me, and they're not afraid of other people would hear. This is one little girl whose right arm were broken during the earthquake, but it was healed. And her mother brought to me because she said, if she writes for 10 minutes, her hand goes on. I did a neurological exam and could not find anything wrong. But when you look at the face of the girl, who was so despondent, and then you ask more, what she tells you is she misses her classmates. In this small village, there used to be 2 classrooms for kids like her age, and now left less than 1 classroom. Another girl brought to me because she couldn't sleep without her parents being present. When you talk to more, she cannot stop crying because she lost several close friends and also her only cousin sister. He lost his daughter and cannot find a job. In that area, for men who's older than 50, there's no way they can find another job. This old grandma, I guess you don't need to tell me what she's telling me there. And this is the family of 9. And their only grandson in the family sustained a fracture and was rescued about 20 hours later from the rubble, and then developed renal failure, were taken away from the family for probably more than a month. The entire family have headache, dizziness, unable to sleep. This young girl who's only 18 years old, she lost, forgive me if I become emotional. She lost her left hemipelvis and left leg, and external genitalia and rectum. And her right leg is below knee amputated. We were asked to see her on the ICU unit. It's not because of all this amputation. It's because she has been screaming for just throughout the day, especially at the time the team giving her dressing change. Her pain is described that no one can touch her skin. As you can see here, she wouldn't allow me to touch her skin. It's a large size of ICU. Once we walked in the door, we heard someone was screaming. That was her. She is 18 years old. So based on our observation, at least 50% of those victims we interacted with experienced post-disaster psychosomatic symptoms and would benefit from psychological and psychiatric interventions. And we observed mainly a large spectrum of anxiety symptoms and mainly presented with somatic kind of complaints. For people who have lost family members, and they tend to be more depressed. Our experience of the trip told us that the local mental health providers are highly skilled. Some of them are at a world level. However, it's just too few to meet the needs of numerous victims. Psychological and psychiatric interventions actually are very well received by the victims, as far as you don't mention that they have a psychiatric problem. Let's go back to this young girl. So I don't know who told her, because there were so many people in the room were talking. So she screamed that, "I don't have a psychiatric illness. I don't want to see a psychiatrist." So I said, "I hear you, and we are not here saying you have a psychiatric problem. We are a group of doctors from America and just come to visit you. And you let us know if you want to talk to us, but it's okay, you don't want to talk to us." So then we left her room, went out to talk to her doctors and her mother. In about 10 minutes, and she asked to talk to us. So we came back. We talked to her, not really talked to her, we just spent about 20 minutes with her. During this 20 minutes of time, we just let her ventilate whatever buried inside of her mind and provided validation and empathy. And she told us that she was buried under the rubble for 48 hours. And she felt like local people would only rescue the people who have money. She said there was a guy who thought she was his daughter, so he pulled a rescue crane close to her and then checked with the name and found that it was not his daughter, so he gave her a bottle of water and left with the crane. So she just felt like, so helpless. And she said, if it were not the military people, and she would never survive. And then after she was rescued, and now she has been in the hospital for this many, many days, and she's facing another hurdle that this family has no money to build another home. She believes that the government demands 30,000 Chinese dollars from the family to build the new home. Her parents are peasants, farmers. They lost everything, they don't have the money. So she was crying, tell us that she just does not understand why should she leave, because this is another burden for the family. And she feels that the earthquake has been constantly occurring. She cannot sleep, and she feels like her body was just shaking like this. So after the 20 minutes, Dr. Zhang asked her, tell me more about your pain. And she told us she has no more pain. Also, the group of health providers we interacted with in Huaxi Hospital, that's Dr. Deng. She actually received some training in this country. She went back to Huaxi Hospital. That's Ms. Wang. She's a very experienced psychological counselor. And those people are volunteers. This was a doctor from my hometown province there to provide some voluntary help. And that's Mr. Alao. He's from Hong Kong. He is a social worker, has been in Chengdu for about 4 years to provide a service for orphans. He owns several orphanages. So after the earthquake, he brings all the orphans grew up in his orphanages and to the earthquake to provide a service. This is one of the group sessions with children we run together. Medications are very scanty in the earthquake zone. And this is the box of sertraline donated by Pfizer. That's all the team had. So when we were there were only about 20 boxes left, maybe a couple of boxes of Celexa and a couple of boxes of Effexor. That was it. So that day when we went to the small villages, and Dr. Xiong and I were the only physicians went. So I was told that you have to save medications as much as you can. And I was given this small bottle of Xanax and a couple of boxes of sertraline. In each box, there were 14 tablets of 50 milligram. There was no formality about dispensing a medication. All I could do is tore a small piece of paper from my notebook and wrap the medications and write the instruction on another small piece of my notebook and give to the patient. Because I was requested to save the medications, and so each time I could only give a week of supply, which is the minimum dose I could give, because otherwise other patient wouldn't benefit from. And that's provided that no one knows when is the next time some physicians will get to this village and with some supplies. Even with this, a lot of places have no formal psychological and psychiatric intervention since the earthquake. What the local services have done is there were several provinces went to the earthquake area and cover services for each geological places. Some of the provinces have strong psychiatric services and some don't. So with each of the provinces have the strong psychiatric services, and they cover several areas because all those areas is in a rural place. They are about between 2 to 4 hours driving single trip from Chengdu city, and those mental health providers are not having a job serving there, so they go when they have a break from their routine work. So in this situation, for areas which considered not severely damaged, they don't have those kind of luxury. This is one of the refugee center we went to visit. Actually, the reason we went, it was not providing mental health. The triangle area here, local people, including Chinese and other ethnicity people, following the earthquake, donated about $300,000 to those people. So we were asked to visit this place to see if the money can be donated to this place, to the school. So we came, it was a time this classroom was studying English. Prior to the earthquake, for those kids who are middle school kids, when they see us, they would jump up and down and talk to us to practice their English. But when we visited and the president of the school asked me to talk to the kids, and you walked in, you see the despondent affect on the kids' face. And all of them look like a log and not interactive, no matter what I tried to inflict them. And there was only one girl at the end looked like was responding to me. But then the teacher quickly says, oh, you guys need to go back to your class. We have to move. So I hope they will receive some formal psychological and psychiatric intervention soon. So with all this, and I ask myself, how can international aid can help, to promote mental health in the post-disaster area? We thought a lot before we went, and we thought a lot during the time we were there, and I thought more after we come back. Different from post-disaster surgical intervention or infectious disease control, mental health rehabilitation post-disaster is much more complex. I don't think you guys need me to say much about that. Mental health in general is not something a small group of physicians can do much. It requires many aspects to be involved, like the government support, financial resource, social environmental conditions, and also preference and acceptance of the victims. And language communicating skills is especially required. We felt that we formed the team pretty well in terms of communicating skills because we all know how to speak Chinese well. We know the local culture some. However, not until we get there, we learned that certain effective communication is still extremely necessary. We were assigned to Huaxi Hospital, and people we were going to work with who did not know us, and nor did we know them. Although we were so eager to help, and our presentation could very likely be perceived as a burden or intrusion, especially in a situation that the local medical providers have been so overwhelmed since the earthquake. And so how could we actually build up a trust between us rapidly is a huge challenge. And we find that some of the strategies we used are pretty helpful. To be respectful rather than being suspicious when you ask something and you didn't get the response as you needed. And be open-minded and politely, requesting you think is right, rather than being veiled and impudently demanding on the things you think is right. And be a team player and do whatever's needed, and not be thinking we're from America, from the top medical institution. We know more than you. We're superior. You do this, this, this. That's not going to work. And be considering, validating, flexible, accommodating, and perseverant. And also be an active team player and take initiatives. I'm going to tell you a couple of examples we have run into, and we felt like we went to a very good conclusion. As I said earlier, we were put on the inpatient service after we arrived for 3 days. When we started, we didn't see a single victims from the earthquake zone. We were shocked. We did not understand what's happening, why like this. Before we went, we were told many patients coming from the earthquake zone to the service. We were even asked to open the clinic. But when we got there, no single victim. And we were there for 3 days and then wonder what's next for us. The person who was assigned by the Health Department, the Ministry of Health Department of China in Huaxi Hospital, talked to us briefly on Monday morning, which was August 25th, and then disappeared. We couldn't get hold of her, and we just had no idea what's happening. As you can think about it, you say there, you started thinking all the negative things. Regardless, we did whatever were required for the inpatient service. We provided rounds, we provided consultations, and we gave lectures based on whatever they needed. And then we actually found a patient who was severely catatonic. And many thanks to Dr. Xiong, who was actually, he must be the one who took the picture. That's why he's not here. He had a lecture of catatonia from his institute. He brought it with him. So and then he was able to give a talk because the doctors and the nurses in this institute had not seen a real catatonia. So they felt it was very helpful. So we did whatever we could. I even used the connections of my family, my collaborators with other institute, and I don't really know how many phone calls we have made between Mr. Chen, who was responsible for communications, and me, and finally we got to move to the Refugee Center. And then we were allowed to go to the Refugee Center with the Huaxi team, which takes 6 hours of a round trip. The Huaxi team was going to stay there for 2 more days because, as I said earlier, they only go on the weekend when they have the break. And then we went on Friday morning, and the Duke team, were told that we have to return to Chengdu in the evening. And next day, if there was a ride, we could go. Otherwise, we don't know if we could make it back. I was so puzzled, just did not understand why we had to come back. So on the way there, and between Mr. Chen and I, we made a zillion phone calls to many people, try to understand. So and out, actually, it was a bittersweet experience. 3 of the team were American citizens. So we were treated as foreigners. There are policies in China about how American would be treated. During those time, actually, foreigners are usually not allowed to go to this area because we went through the Chinese overseas. So we were going to be there. However, we would still be considered as foreigners and would receive the great treatment as a foreigner. So the local people who were about an hour away by car from the refugee center and felt like they were so overwhelmed. They had no energy to provide the great hospitality as Chinese people usually do. So I finally said we come and pay for everything for ourselves. What about you just lend us a car? We pay for the chef, we pay for the gasoline, and we pay for the mileage we're going to use. We pay for hotel, we pay for meal, everything. If you could let us stay in the local town rather than going back to Chengdu, so that would give us at least another 4 hours to work with the victims. So I think finally we touched them. So and then they allowed us to stay in the refugee center with the Huaxi team, and that's how we were able to hike 6 hours to go to those small villages and to see those victims who have never seen a physician since the earthquake. When we went to the Huaxi hospital, we were thinking about it to work with the victims who were hospitalized in the hospital. And then we were assigned to the mental health service, and then we found no victims. Okay, so and then on Tuesday before our departure, we said, well, let's take a couple of hours, just tour the campus to see what's happening there. And we walked around and we saw this place. Sorry, you guys cannot really see much here. It says the Earthquake Victim Rehabilitation Center at Huaxi Hospital. We were like, wow, what's happening about this? Can we come to visit the victims here? And so we went and we said, we found this place and we want to know that, if we can just visit them. If you guys don't feel you want us to provide a psychiatric intervention, we just want to see them. Is that okay? And turn out, we were so well welcomed. It's such huge institute. So people don't talk to each other like here at Duke, right? People don't talk to each other. So the mental health service don't really get to hear unless they get a call. But it's not a habit to provide like a counseling service as what we do here at Duke. So that's why this center basically left alone. And this chief resident, Dr. Zhang, actually is very psychologically mindful. He was doing a marvelous job for those victims, but then he asked us to help him as well. And he also asked us to go to the ICU to see those patients. So at the time we arrived to China, to the earthquake zone, and the services provided by the international teams were mainly focused on providing trainings to the local people. Along with the progress of the time and the conditions, and the local people pick up more of the skills of doing this, and actually turn out what they need the most is face-to-face counseling for complex cases they are managing, and also for themselves. And also, that was the environment, remember, had been ruined by the Communist Party for many, many years. And mental health had never been, paid attention until the last 10 years or so. So to disseminate and penetrate all those is a huge challenge. So with all this, and we felt like, it just the language and the communicating skills is really the key element for international aid can help them. However, few international teams would have the luxury to have all the capacities. Therefore, teaming up with various areas of experts would be the key to help out. So we were there, and I overheard from the Huaxi team that there was a group of doctors from East Tennessee University going to come to provide trainings of 2 days. And they lost their interpreter, who was not able to get a visa to China, who was actually originally Chinese. So don't ask me why, I don't understand that either. So then I overheard it. I said, well, how about us to provide the interpretation? I think, we are qualified. And they said, well, would that be downplay you guys? That would minimize your quality, whatever. I said, no, we are here to help. We're here to do whatever you guys need. And then they were so thrilled. And then we did live interpretation for them for 2 days. And also because of us, and we also did some training together because we know the local culture more than them. And see, that's Dr. Dyer, who's the head of the team. That's Dr. Sekar, if I remember his name right. He was an expert from India in terms of post-mental health. India has like a NIMH system here, like America, mainly targeting on post-disaster mental health. And this was a medical student of Dr. Dyer, and she is a resident of Dr. Dyer. This doctor is from Huaxi, that's Glanxiong. And like I said, it's really great if we can team up with all the experts in the world. Mr. Alao, in China, there's no social service like social workers as what we have here. And Mr. Alao brought a very unique component into the post-disaster mental health rehabilitation. And one thing we know very well is to help the victims to recognize what kind of productivity they can bring back into their life. And so he was running the group with the local people on a regular basis on the weekend when they went, and we were actually teaching them to make bags with bordering kind of skills, and hopefully to sell them so those local people would feel like they wouldn't feel like they are useless. And this is one training we did together. And to respect the local culture and try to understand what the people think is extremely important. This is Dr. Bra. She's also from India and expert in the post-disaster mental health rehabilitation. It was so interesting because she was talking to the group, and the trainees who have been providing mental health are mainly female. So she was sharing the research experience from India. We're seeing that a woman is a high-risk group would develop like anxiety, depression, and PTSD post-disaster, and without recognizing that she was offending the trainees. And initially, I was basically doing just like a direct interpretation. I was not thinking either until see that the heated, atmosphere came out from the audience. It's like all of a sudden I realized that they were not happy to hear that a woman more vulnerable. So, and then I had to switch the gear a little bit and manipulate it a little bit. So, and then finally they're happy. So we said, well, yes, this is data from India and other part of the world, and it may not apply to Chinese. And let's wait until we get the data, see what's happening. So at the time we leave China, the doctors we worked together with the Huaxi, they told us we're the best among the international aides. So this is my aftermath thoughts about how to work as an international team. And this is the effort in the pyramidal situation of a mission. As you can see, we can just care for a single patient, or we care for a patient with a local team, or we train them, or we work with them together to establish community-based service, and also to improve and modify the infrastructure of the care system, which probably require humongous effort. So, mental health prevention post-disaster is broadly accepted now in the world. However, in many countries, actually, to implement this is still very challenging, including China. And international aids tend to flush in soon after disaster, and then, with resource depleted, and people get tired, and then occupied with other work, and just cannot go on. And also, with cultural barrier, language barrier, and I think, just few teams can do it. Like for me, if it were not all the support I've received here at Duke, and I would not even able to walk out for 2 weeks to be there to provide the service. Therefore, that I feel that it would be ideal, like under this kind of situation, if there is like international consortia and which has been there or organized quickly, and to mobilize the expertise and financial resources, and working with the local government or the central government of the country to provide those kind of services. And I think the world will be a lot better on hands-on of those kind of situations. There are many, many people I needed to thank for us and the medical team to be able to complete our mission. And due to the time constraints, so I'm not going to mention each of them, but in particular, I wanted to mention Dr. Joe, who's in the audience. Joe, can you please stand up? And Joe called on fundraising activity in the community he lives, and then raised several $100s for us. And we were very pleased with those kind of activities. And I wanted to take a particular moment to thank the victims of the earthquake to allow us to provide services and also to strengthen our psychology. As you can see on our face, when we walked out of this young girl's room, and all of us, 4 of us, feel like so despondent. And I started doubting, and I don't know if I could ever help this girl emotionally for her to recover. And we walked into the next door. We saw this young boy who was the same age of the girl, who was in the same classroom of her, and who was also under the rubble for 48 hours. And the difference of the injury with him from her is he did have his genitalia intact and intact rectum. However, the only leg he has is above knee amputation. He will never stand up unless the technology improves, and then maybe they will have some prosthetic allow him to stand up. She could still stand up. Look at the big smile on his face. He's not only so healthy for himself, he visits her several times a day to help her to recover psychologically. So with him, and we look at the effect on me and Dr. Zhang and here. And he is that kind of patient that give us the strength and then remind us that we can help. And I also want to thank my team. Look at how tired they are at the end. This is the time we were waiting for the flight from Chengdu to Beijing. Without their support, I could never get this amount of work done. And thank you all. Go back to the acknowledge face page. Yeah, don't have to talk. Questions and comments?
Jan, I just want to let everybody know that although there was money raised within the community, it's very expensive. Dr. Zhang actually spent a lot of her own money to go over to China to provide this aid. But I want to ask you, how do you approach, the enormity of the situation? I mean, how each day when you're there, how can you approach the enormity of the situation? Did you approach, the victims and just have them talk to you? Did you help them cook their meal? Did you, how do you do that? Because it's so huge.
Yeah, well, that's a very good question. We put a lot of thought before we went, and actually Dr. Zhang came from California to Beijing, and we met there, and we had a meeting right away to talk about what we think we can do. But once you get there, and whatever you had planned, it kind of like just disappeared. You do whatever is needed. And so we just present them as like we are the team from Huaxi and America, and we're here to just do whatever you guys need. And they come to us, and you don't even think anymore of whatever is needed. So mostly is just let them talk to us and hear what they have been suffering. And those people, they have such low need. They're happy just for talking to us. They don't really have much like thought like, oh, I want this, I want that. Like one picture, I had no time to talk. A lady who lost her business of a motel, more than 30 rooms, and a restaurant. So this is the lady. She was already taking medication, so we were asked to just deliver more medication. And we sat down, chatted with her more, and we asked her, what else you think we can help you? This red and white town, before the earthquake, the people there are pretty rich because it was a very popular tourist business, in the mountains, and it's beautiful scenery, all that. So now after that, everything was gone. What she told us is her son had a toe injury by a lady who smashed his toe driving, and went to Huaxi Hospital for amputation. And after the earthquake, he lost his discharge certification. And with that, he could get some reimbursement. So all in her mind is if we could talk to the Huaxi Hospital discharge office and get a copy of the certificate, and she could go get the reimbursement from this injury and restart her business. Yes, please.
So what's the long-term outcome, or what are the next steps for recovery for the town?
Are you talking about us, the medical team, or are you talking about what's going on in China?
I would say both. Do you have any intentions of going back, and how are they now?
Great question. We do want to go back again, but based on what we have seen, and they love us to go back, but I think just to be there for like a couple of weeks and the help we could provide is so limited. Yeah, so what they want is large spectrum. What we can do at this point, which is what we have been doing, is to continue provide the support we have been doing emotionally mainly. So between Dr. Zhang and I, we're setting up a regular counseling service for them, and to provide some comments about complex cases they have had, and also to provide a counseling service for them, because they needed to process their struggles as well. And this is something we have between me and Dr. Zhang, we are able to provide regular service on the every 2 weeks basis. So thanks to the internet service, so we get on the Skype and we talk to them. Meanwhile, I'm working on seeing if I can raise more funds, because majority of the services are done by volunteers. No one can volunteer forever. God, it's reality. So a lot of volunteers already burned down and need more money to support them to continue the work. They are the experts. We need them. So I hope I can raise more money to support some of the volunteers on a year basis, at least, to continue. And then for them to train more counselors locally, like the school we went. They could train the teachers and the school official people to do that, and they provide more supervision like that. The other thing is, can we facilitate more about having the Chinese central government to put more effort in? The good thing is, at least now finally I see that the Chinese central government has changed their mind from reprice down of the mental health needs to promoting that. On September the 12th, about a week after we left, there were more instructions coming out from the central government about rehabilitation post-disaster. At least one page of that thick document were devoted to mental health and building up community-based services. However, the money to them is very limited. So I have sent a letter with constructive suggestions to the head of the Ministry of the Mental Health of China with constructive suggestions. And I have sent our report to WHO. And I'm working on publishing our report through Lancet, hopefully, because Lancet somehow have heavily engaged in promoting, medical practice in China. So hopefully, they will take this more serious. Just influence more. So hopefully, Chinese government eventually will realize that they needed to do more work to put more money in. So in terms of the consequences of the mental health, we have plenty data from the rest of the world. It's going to be a big burden on the Chinese people, and unless it's more taken care.
In regards to your efforts to raise funds for supporting, have you been able to get the assistance of any infamous Chinese that might have a lot of impact on raising money?
Very limited. I think one reason probably is related to how much I can put in myself. I have to say that I didn't realize actually it was like more than a full-time job of person from the time I said, okay, let's organize a team to go. And I already have 2 full-time jobs between patient care and research. So I'm doing whatever I can. That's what I feel like if there is some consortia, like a post-disaster mental health provision somewhere there, and we could go just, utilize some of the resource there, it'd be a lot easier. But right now, I kind of as I told Peggy, I use my spare time to do this. I have to set up my priorities. And right now, I think my chairmans will not allow me to take this as my priority unless I want to quit the job. But that's an excellent question.
Well, Dr. Zhang, I wonder from a research perspective, have you been able to generate some research ideas in this area and further your research in the future?
Great, thank you. And also thank you for coming. She's actually from Chengdu. So if you guys have any further questions, you guys can ask her. One of the purpose we went, I didn't list here, is we wanted to collect research data. I got our ARB agreed for me to do it, but when you get there, one advice you have is don't ask people questions unless you have a system set out to help those people who unveil their struggles. And also, the number of people we have to see and the time we could spend with them just won't allow us to do that at all. Although, actually, for Yin Song, and that was his major responsibilities. So each of us had our responsibilities to go there. His major responsibilities, including collect data, develop a data form. We actually have that set out and collect data and document our trip. So thank him that it was all the photos mainly were from him. So we didn't, but the team we worked together had collected some data. They are working with us to try to get it published in some more influential journals, and we're working together for future data collection. And because it's very important for us to know what kind of help it will reduce those kind of mental health conditions, and also just what's going on in this particular part of the world is very important information for the medical literature. And one of the reasons to raise funds to support volunteers continuing the work will allow us to collect more data. Yes?
Did you talk to the mental health workers there as well?
Yeah.
Did you meet, and how do you debrief, how do you tell the mental work healthers there not to burn out, and how is their mental health?
Well, they were burning out. There was no doubt about it. Some of them are more forthcoming, so they would sit down and talk to us. Some of them probably more like in distance with us. Like one of the counselors we worked together actually was struggling with her own personal struggles as well. So we talked a lot, and I continued talking with her as well. She asked me, she wouldn't say it were her problem initially. She would say, for a situation like this, what do you think about taking medication? I said, I think, at this time it would really be necessary. And then she went on taking medication, so she's doing better now. But like I said, mental health really goes with biological component and a psychological component, a social component, with such intense emotional stress. Almost every of us would suffer something like that. So it really, as far as I think right now, and social support, including financial support, would reduce their stress significantly. Yeah, that's something, I hope I can do more. Yes.
So you shared with us that you were able to, you had some medication, and is that medication, is it fairly well accepted, and was there any consideration given to maybe traditional medicine there locally as well?
Great question. It's very well accepted by the patients. No one had mentioned to me that I want herbal medicine at all, and those poor villagers, it just seemed to me that, whatever you gave to them, they're going to take it. And the sad part is we know very well, even the experts in Chengdu, they know well as well too. They know well too, is benzodiazepine really should not be given to people who are suffering post-disaster emotional disturbance, because it has been proven that benzodiazepine, it does put people into sleep, but does not allow them to process. And then we may prolong the course of PTSD and may exacerbate it. However, the resource was so scanty, for me, I know I should not do it, but what else can you give to the patient? The problems, those people are so poor, and majority of them now receive 10 Chinese dollar a day from the government, and it was said it would only provide for half a year. So they are saving as much as they can down the road. So there's no way you can rely on them to buy medication. But the regulatory role in China would not allow us to bring medication in. I was able to get a support from Mainland company who produced a generic prazosin, which is an antihypertensive medication, has been proven to reduce nightmares and improve sleep post-disaster very well. And I got 5 boxes of medication set in Daniel, who's one of my research assistants' office. We're not allowed to bring in. And we're sneaking now, so don't ever make it public. So we'll do whatever we can. But now, even with some of the regulatory rules in this country, there are things we cannot do. Because, I wanted to buy some medication in China just for them. But we learned the trazodone, the cost of trazodone is more than we buy here if you just convert the money. So then I wanted to buy here, but then now we have the regulatory rule that as a physician you cannot really write. And so it's a lot of this. So that's why another reason make me see if there's an international consortia who will cover those kind of issues. So when a disaster happens like this, and all the resources in the world can be utilized much wisely rather than wasted. And I already foresee majority of the bottles for the pretzels in my office will have to be destroyed. Because it goes expired at the end of March next year.
Was an organization like the Red Cross not able to help at all?
No. We went through the offices for overseas, and they are so thrilled. They said, once you get a permission from Huaxi Hospital, just ship to my office. But then, go through Huaxi Hospital is a nightmare. And then they will look at, I sent all the record I could, with all the documentation to see how wonderful this medication is. And they have their own agenda. They're not going to work on this because your medication is going to be expired very soon. If this, but then the drug company will not donate us something unless it's going to be expired soon. So it just, so many hurdles, so many hurdles. Grace has a question.
So when I'm hearing you talk, I'm hearing a lot about the difficulty of getting the supplies in. And it seems like, is there any help through like the embassy? Or it seems like there's a need for diplomacy or just someone to help you, because even if you gain the resources here and you get the help, getting it in sounds like a really big challenge. And I'm just wondering, who do you enlist to help you with that? Because like you're a Chinese person who is now in America, but there may be others who would like to help, and they might not have that in. You know what I mean? They're more just a person with no real Chinese connection. So who kind of facilitates that process? I'm just curious about getting the help to where it needs to go and dealing with the government and their sort of rules and regulations.
Great question. I wish I had an answer for you. This is what we have been trying to work out since the first day we said we were going to take a team there. There are things you can do, like, if you do have the money, you can buy medications in China and then just give to the physicians. Or, we just sneak some bottles in our luggage and bring in, which we wish we had done. We were so afraid that we would break law and then we would be kicked out of the country. So we did not have the guts to do so at the time we went. Money is something that's more easily to be accepted. At least right now I learned that, if I ever raised a fund, I could just bring to Huaxi, give it to this group of doctors, says, hey, listen, this amount of money is designated to this group of people, not for anything else. And that's another reason for me to keep seeing this international consortium designated for post-disaster mental health. Because, the money went to the Red Cross. I don't know where, I'm sure the money is used, but what is the proportion designated to the mental health rehabilitation is just, the Dr. Zhang, the one I showed you who got training in this country, she was so motivated. I just cannot believe she had 2 small kids and she drinks 5 cups coffee every day to do all her work. And she has to pay from her own pocket to buy medications at times because she just cannot get money from Huaxi Hospital on time. And then at the time, she doesn't know when it's going to be reimbursed.
So do you feel it's tricky.
Maybe the battery is dead.
Yeah. Hello?
Yeah.
Okay. So it sounds like actually if people were to give the money and the resources to you, to your group, then you would be able to get it more directly into the area.
Yes.
And do you feel confident that that money would go towards where it's needed the most?
Yes. Yes. After seeing how devoted that group is, and I have 100% confidence with it. Yeah.
Well, that's because I think people, they see disaster on TV, and you can always, on the news, you can hit a link and donate to the Red Cross, but you never know where that money's going or what's really happening with it.
Yeah.
I think that is something that works to your benefit when raising funds, is you can say, we will get this money directly to these people, and I think that really, for citizens, that means a lot.
Excellent point, Chris. Excellent point. Yeah. Any other questions or comments? Well, thanks again for all of you come and to share with me about our experiences.